I've experienced many times in my life as a priest that talking to people of good faith about power can be uncomfortable. We've heard many times that power corrupts, and many people involved in organized religion or that have ever worked for a company or that have been part of, Little League Baseball or anything have been hurt at some point by institutional betrayal at the hands of powerful people. Many of us, including myself, some of us have been taught to be humble and meek and poor and maybe even docile. And those are qualities that I got raised with. Um, And while I value those, I know that there is another side to the experience of faith. I just want to give you a quick overview. The Prophet Muhammad is held to be a miracle performing person of power. And Gautama Buddha found power in clarity and focus and love that was used to heal and teach others. The Taoist master Lao Tzu teaches that understanding others is strength, but understanding ourselves is power. And Jesus Christ told his followers that power and the Holy Spirit would come upon them. And after that, even Paul, the apostle, prays for strength and power to be part of his people's lives. So I want to establish in this conversation, when we talk about power, sometimes it can feel a little bit uncomfortable. And hopefully what we want to do is talk about it in the way that is generative and life-giving, that it's just a part of who we are. One of those ways we like to call power within. Power within is a way to describe our capacity, one's capacity for love and friendship and courage and trust and hope and sustenance. Can you give a quick thumbs up if you've ever felt the power within inside of you, that capacity for love and friendship? Yeah. Sometimes we even have practices that we call spiritual practices, whose purpose is meant to build and expand this capacity within us. I want to pass it over to Josh Dunham, who has a short story about how he discovered and noticed and observed the power within in his situation.
Hello, everyone. I am Josh Dunham, pastor of Covenant Presbyterian Church in Gresham, Oregon, and a member of the design team for this cohort. I want to share a story with you about the spiritual presence in one-to-ones and its ability to ignite personal inner power in our individual selves. In this work, I have come to meet and get to know many people from very different backgrounds and build trusting relationships. One of those encounters came through a serendipitous conversation that developed between Presbyterians and Sikhs. As I would say for my tradition, a divinely providential conversation ensued. We came together because the Presbyterians had an empty property on Farmington Road, and the Sikhs were looking to build and own a new Gurdwara, their sacred worship space, on of all places, Farmington Road. And a mutual contact, friend, made the introduction between our organizations. In full disclosure for all of you, I was initially hesitant of the conversation because I had already made up my mind as to what to do with the whole property. I do that a lot. It's a trait I need to constantly overcome. So I went in as a skeptic, but as an open skeptic, willing to listen. And that was the opening the Spirit needed to move in me and in our process. As we met together many times over tea and delicious food in the homes of our wonderful Sikh hosts, and whom I now proudly call friends, I started to hear the beautiful, strong, and at times heartbreaking story of the Sikh experience in America, the Sikh experience in Oregon, the Sikh experience of faith and the divine. As time went, I was able to realize where our inner drive, inner passion, inner focuses aligned. The divine was present in everything, and it was made ever more evident as we continued to speak and work together. There are things that were shared by my Sikh friends that opened my eyes and gave me a new way to see God's involvement in this work. And from those meetings, they invited me to attend one of the sacred holy celebrations. Instantly, I was welcomed and brought into their community with open arms and smiles. They shared conversation, food, headscarves, and even slippers with me, all to help me feel more welcome, included, and at ease in their sacred space. And they invited me to sit and listen to the ceremonial music that was kindly subtitled digitally in English. And in that space, with the hospitality shown to me, the sacred music, and being surrounded by worshiping believers, I felt the deepest sense of an inner power. In that room, after all the cups of tea and talking about hopes and struggles, the reality of this spiritual power, this divine presence, this fire within was kindled and burning. And it was ignited for this work and will keep me going as the road will eventually get tough. This work is not for the faint of heart. You need to find that inner strength to keep you going. And in making connections through one-to-ones, my hope is that you too can find it.
Great. Janelle and I met when she was a student at Warner Pacific University, and I came into her class as a community organizer to help those students in that class learn to have one-to-one conversations and uncover the pressures on their lives. And what we discovered together was that there were a lot of housing pressures, that the university housing was expensive and it was inadequate, and a lot of people chose not to live on campus because and commute because it was too expensive and it was inadequate. There wasn't drinking water in some of the dorm rooms. And that broke down a sense of community, but everyone was kind of walking around like a bunch of individuals lamenting, but not talking to one another and discovering that they were having the same experience and getting organized. And Janelle's was a leader in that class, and she started having one-to-one conversations. She was also an RA, a resident assistant. And so she was trying to like fix it from inside the system, but she didn't have enough power in her position to actually make the changes happen. And so by doing one-to-one conversations in that class and having that class became a core team, much like your core teams, they started having one-to-one conversations with the student body and discovered that everyone was having the same pressures and that they wanted to focus their energy together, their power among, on some of key decision makers at the university. And they were able to get drinking water reestablished in the dorms. They also, a number of the washing machines were broken. They were able to get those fixed. And they were able to get some strategic meetings around the cost of housing at Warner Pacific. So while they found courage and strength, that power within, they also found capacity among, that power among, where they could go and influence decision makers who had power over to move and change the system to get what the community needed.
Taking a quick look at power and the different ways that we talk about it, it's a little bit of a natural phenomenon. I think we've all experienced power over. When I'm honest, I even recognize that there's times in my life I've used power over. It's something I'm addicted to. I'm trying to break that addiction. And in the meantime, among all of us, we have firsthand experience, I think, sensing that power within, beginning to practice the power that we have amongst each other when we recognize our common experience. And so to that end, I want to pass it off to LaVeta, who's going to talk a little bit about the common experience of this land in which we all are living.
Land has power. It has power to create. It has power to create and to nurture and to transform. It has a story. It has relationship. And our relationship with the land creates the stories and creates the stories of connection, and it creates the stories of power. Thank you for coming and sharing with us today, Mother, and I give it to you.
Thank you for inviting me. St. Philip the Deacon, I think of it as a place that's been doing the gospel on the corner of Knott Street and Rodney Avenue for 109 years.
Mm.
And there is a long story about how it got there. The interesting thing about being there, much of my life I was there. I was baptized into that congregation in 1938, the year I was born. So I heard the stories about how it got there all of my life. And Portland, back at the turn of the 20th century, was a town with very few folk of color here. And those who were here, many came from the islands. They were Afro-Caribbeans, they were Anglicans. So they were used to, they looked for a church when they got here. And they wound up downtown at St. Stephen's, which in those days was St. Stephen's Cathedral, and then the other big church downtown, Trinity Church. They were greeted, but one of the things they realized was they weren't there very long until they said, gee whiz, we'll never be on the vestry here. And in some places, some folks, the stories they carried were said that they were suggested that they go look for a congregation of their own. So the first part was, where are we going to find it? Where are we going to get the resources to build it? So they talked and they started meeting in one another's homes. And then if any of you know the restaurant Toro Bravo on Russell Street, that building and that particular place was the first place they found to rent. And they did not have a clergy person there. They used lay readers. There was a gentleman from U.S. National Bank, Blaine Coles, who was a lay reader. And he would come every Sunday and read morning prayer. And about once a quarter, the Bishop Sumner at that time would come and celebrate the Eucharist for them. So as time went on and they started to grow a little bit, and about the same time, people were starting to come in to Northeast Portland who migrated here from the South, and some of them from the Midwest. My mother came here from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My father came here from Mason City, Iowa. So they became communicants there. They got along with the lay readers until 1937, and at that time, a young man who went to the seminary, Kentucky Seminary for the Colored, which was an Episcopal seminary on the back in Kentucky. It since has been merged with Virginia Theological Seminary. And Leon Stone came out here, and he had not yet been ordained. He was ordained at Trinity, and then he started his ministry. They soon decided that they needed to have a bigger place, and a building, a German congregational church up on the corner, the very corner of Knott Street and Rodney, was for sale. They didn't know how they were going to buy it, but with fundraising, with help from the Diocese of Oregon, they did manage to buy it. And so that was the place. The minute they moved into there, it became a community center too, of sorts, for folks. People would come there for plays, dinners, dances, card parties. They did all kinds of things there to open it up to the community. Once World War II started, there were no USO around town where gentlemen of color, servicemen of color could go. So they opened up to do that until they did get a USO there over on Williams Avenue. And it continued. And as the war ended, the building was starting to look a little bit worse for wear, and people had the kind of conversation we're having now. Maybe we should decide to have a new building. Well, how are we going to do that? What are we going to do for resources? So again, the diocese has always been very willing to help the one congregation of color here in Oregon to reach its goals, but there were still fundraisers going on there. Father Stone stayed there for 37 years. His whole ministry was spent in that parish. It became a center for community action and community activities, being an Episcopal church, we were the only church where the kids could dance. Teenage kids could dance in the community. So there were lots of dances over there. And plays and things, and people came to know it. So we were there, and those are the kinds of things that went on. There were a number of chef cooks. My father was a chef cook, and there were several others. So they started having big dinners. That was one of the major fundraisers, and also a way of feeding the community too. That's still one of the ministries there. When I was sent there after the surprise of my life, being called to ordain ministry, we decided one day that people probably were hungry for Thanksgiving, and we had a large Thanksgiving dinner, and we went and invited the ladies who worked on the street on MLK and other places, and took dinners out to them or asked them in, and they looked at us and said, "You mean you would invite us?" And we said, "You're God's children, aren't you?" So they came, and ever since then, it's been open, and there's still what's called the Deacon's Dining Room now, because somebody wanted to call it a soup kitchen over the years. And we said, no, these are our honored guests. We will call it the Deacon's Dining Room. One day when I was down there cooking, because I am a daughter of a chef cook, but I wasn't known for being able to cook. So I told people, yes, we'll cook. And I got a recipe and started cooking. And some of the ladies in the congregation who really knew how to cook felt sorry for me and came in and started helping. And that became the major community ministry there. Other people decided that maybe they needed to gather clothing and give it out. So it became a real community place. And so after I left there to go to seminary and other churches over the years, it kind of shrunk a little bit. And we wondered what would happen. And Bishop Ladderhoff, at that time I was serving as principal of Jefferson High School, and he came out to Jefferson and said, "I really shouldn't ask you this, but would you consider coming to St. Philip?" And I said, "Of course I will." And I didn't have any idea how I'd do that, but I was the principal of Jefferson High School and the rector of St. Philip of Deacon Parish. And it worked out well in the community because the kids knew what I did and the community knew what I did. And so if I needed help, it was always readily at hand. So that piece of land there did a lot in terms of all the ways it could be used. We were going along, and then the lady who lived across the street owned the house right next on the east side of the church. And she always said she would like to sell it to the church. And we decided to see what we could do to raise some money. Well, we had people in the congregation who knew things, knew people, knew about grants. I hope Maria's listening to this. So we find those people again. It's almost like it's repeating. And we were right there. We were sitting there, and they told us, "You came in within 1 point of getting this grant. We invite you to come back next year because you will certainly get the grant." That was the year the Great Depression, the Great Recession came. So we had to wind up finally even selling the house next door with that. But the land has still been there. And once Mother Maria came to St. Philip the Deacon, she looked through records. She talked about us, to us about doing things. And now, lo and behold, we're having conversations about using this land again in a way to provide housing for folks. And we are looking forward to seeing what happened. And the good part of this story is we got a large grant from the Diocese of Oregon. And so now we're working out, well, she's working out. I don't know why I'm saying we're working out. I keep thinking I'm retired. So we'll work out the things that need doing. And we have lots of people in the community. That's why this group, Leaven, is so good for us, to learn from other folk who are also learning about sharing the power, learning about accessing the power, and all the hoops we have to jump through to do anything like this. And we have a built-in community across the street. There are lots of homeless people who camp across the street from our parish. I imagine many parishes are going through that. And they probably would be the first ones, if we build something, who would be ready to move in. I had one of the people in our congregation who called me up the other day and said, do you think we should make little houses now, tiny houses? Now, that's just something I never thought of, and I don't know if anybody else in this group has thought about that, creating a bunch of tiny houses. But the whole issue to me is, and the story is that once you get a piece of land, there are all kinds of things that can be done with it. It will take a lot of work, it will take a lot of ingenuity. There will be a lot of bumps along the road. And we must remember that when we were called to do this work, we were called with somebody who has the power. You know, God gives us the power to do everything we need to do. And I think that church will be there. My dream would be that it gets there. If we do something, it gets there before I exit this world. So folks better be stepping, because I'm now 82 years old. So I expect to be around a little bit longer, actually quite a bit longer, but anyway. So if you have any questions or anything, that's sort of the sketchy overview of the land in St. Philip the Deacon.
That's
And
beautiful.
Gospel on Knott Street and Rodney Avenue.
Yeah, and I took a picture of I went to Google, and I'll share a picture of the land so that folks can see where you all are located. Here we go. One moment.
Yeah, that's right at the corner there, Knott Street and Rodney Avenue.
Yep, there we go.
And
And
the
then,
view. Yeah, that's the main entrance, and that goes into the parish hall. There's Mother Maria's office there to our left as we look at it, and then
right
the
here.
sanctuary is on the right. If you want to go over there to the right as you face the screen.
Okay.
Over there by the bushes, and
Yep. And then there's another view of it.
And then that little sloping part out, that room was originally the chapel, and at one time we kept the chapel open at all times, but this is not the day and time you can do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So that land has definitely nourished the community. I remember as a child hearing about things happening over at St. Philip the Deacon. In fact, it's what I find interesting is that that whole plot of land, because you're right across from the Matt Dishman Center.
Right.
And it's amazing how having the Matt Dishman Center and then having St. Philip, how there's so much community that has just flowed through that block, just that one block.
And things still happen. And while St. Philip was being constructed after they demolished the original building, we worshiped in the gym over there. That was still the old Elliott School at that time.
Is that right?
Yes, and that's where we worshiped until the parish hall was completed first, and we worshiped there, and then they did the sanctuary.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And as people, as you have been listening, I invite you to think about the system of relationships and interconnections that you heard in this story. It was just absolutely powerful. What were the systems of relationships and interconnections that you heard? And I invite you to share your reflections in the chat box. We heard about the relationship with the diocese. I found it interesting, Mother Alcena, that you had this relationship with the diocese, and I also, of course, found it interesting as to why does it always end up being that there is a Black church and a white church? And I wonder how was that reflected in St. Philip the Deacon? What was your congregation like?
Yeah, the congregation for many years, it's never been a totally Black congregation, but it's been majority Black for many years. And then, about the time I went there in 1993, and even before that time, it was probably about 1/4 people who weren't of color there. And mixed families there. It was a real haven for mixed families. We had even been told by a couple of families who had mixed race children that they had been invited by another clergy person that perhaps they'd be more comfortable in St. Philip.
Mm.
So
Yep. So that really goes to talk about the power of relationship, doesn't it?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm seeing in our chat that there were relationship with the neighbors who wanted to sell their house. There was relationship among the immigrants from the Caribbean seeking homes. Relationship with people moving from other lands and finding each other here. That is so important when you move from that immigrate from one place to another place, to find people with whom you share mutual connections.
Yeah. And at one time we had people from the Eritrea and Ethiopia who came and used our building. And it was very interesting because even though they were kind of evangelicals now, whenever they had been raised as Orthodox, and whenever there were the high holy days and we were having the Christmas Eve Mass, they always came.
Yeah.
And they now have they purchased the church on Killingsworth and about 34th, 35th up there, the large yellow church. They have all kinds of things going on there now.
Yeah, Lauren was noting that you had relationships with local businesses. And that's something as communities of faith, oftentimes we forget. But it is essential to be neighbors with all of the people that are around us.
Yes, it's critical. And then and I found that maybe it's because I had that dual vocation, but I found that it was helpful for schools to have relationships with, because I know my neighbor, Augustana, up the street there on 15th and Knott, they had a relationship with Irvington School. So the days that school, if something happened, school had to go, they could come up there. So,
Oh, and the Urban League, NAACP, Rosemary Anderson, so many organizations.
well, the Urban League actually was started by people from St. Philip. And a good many of them were involved with the NAACP too. But most of the Black professionals in town, like the doctors and the lawyers and the educators, all belonged to St. Philip. And that's how it got a reputation for a while. It was hard to live down.
Yeah, that happens, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Social class.
Yeah. I'm wondering how has the change in the neighborhood impacted the rising prices in the neighborhood, just the change in the people who live in the neighborhood? How has that impacted St. Philip?
Well, it changed it completely. When I returned there in 1993, people thought the church was closed. The people who had just moved in the neighborhood, they just built those apartments down on the next block. And so one of the things I suggested we do as a congregation was to go and knock on doors and greet the people and find out who live there. And I was at first greeted with, we're Episcopalians, we don't do that. And my response was, we're going. And these same folks came back after they heard all the stories when they knocked on doors about people said, oh, we thought the church was closed. We're so frightened. The gang thing was going on then at its zenith. And they were afraid to let their children go trick-or-treating at Halloween. So we had an All Saints party. And they came. We had probably about 40 kids there that night who came in for this All Saints party, having a place to go, again, using the land as a way where children could be safe and the community could be safe. Now that is since sort of changing again, because now the land is gentrifying, and most of the people couldn't afford to live, who were there when I got there then, couldn't afford to live there now.
So what is the vision for St. Philip now?
Well, I would invite Mother Maria to come in. She has the vision now. We pass the vision on.
Okay, Maria, would you like to speak?
Sure. I guess what I would say the vision is that we are looking for ways to continue this use of the land for the benefit of the community around us. And I think also, wanting to kind of stake a claim on this corner and be able to say, this doesn't get gentrified. This doesn't get sold to a developer for the highest price who can then earn lots of money off of it. That really, this place has been a place that has served the community and the needs of the community. And right now, it appears that a pressing need that we can address is affordable housing. And so that's what brought us to this conversation. And there's a part of it that we also hope that this helps sustain us in the future as a congregation. But I think wanting to kind of put an end to or use what power we do have to stop the kind of growth of the gentrified neighborhood around us, and use it creatively and boldly. And we're perfectly willing to shamelessly plug the Diocese of Oregon for what they're willing to offer us. And sometimes that's out of generosity and excitement for our mission. And sometimes I think there's a little bit of, diocesan shared guilt in there, and that's okay, to be able to gather that together and find ways to creatively use what we have in new ways for the neighborhood, I think is where we would like to go. So we're working on that together. So that's what
Thank you, Maria. Pastor Maria, thank you for sharing that. I want to just give us a chance. Are there any questions or reflections that someone would like to voice? Over Zoom, we use the chat a lot, but I also want to note that we have people who are here on the phone. So if you are on the phone and you have a question or a comment that you would like to make, I invite you to do so.
Hello, I'm not on the phone, and I'm not real good at using the chat room. I just wrote something. My name is B. Gilmore, or Beatrice Gilmore.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
How are you?
So great to see you.
It's good to hear you.
I came especially tonight because my daughter said you were going to be there. St. Philip's just played a big part in my life because I was one of those young adults who, was at the center a lot. It was the only place in Portland at the time. This was during World War II when we were here. And it was a place that we as teenagers looked forward to having social hour, dancing, playing, and I attended the St. Philip's service for a while because I wasn't familiar with that type of service, and it has a special place in my heart. Thank you so much.
So good to hear from you. It's so good. And I remember Reverend Gilmore too, and because he used to work with my husband. Yes.
As a congregation, you will be exploring what is the genealogy of the land on which you are, your building is sited. What is the genealogy of that land? Who lived there before you? How was the land purchased? Where did the money come from? Who are the people that it has served in your neighborhood? And I want to just let you know that on the Leaven Community Land and Housing page, coalition page, if you go to Multnomah County, you will find information under resources to help you begin that exploration. There's a link to a page, and on that page, there are links to many different sites to say who was on this land and to take you different places so you can determine how was it platted and who bought it and many other stories. And I also, though, want to encourage you to talk with people in your neighborhood, in your congregation. This is a great time to have one-to-one conversations so that you can get information and understand the story of the land on which your building is sited and the story of the land in which you share community one with another and with your neighbors. And so to give you just a little bit more about how that can be, before I go any further though, I do want to say thank you just to Mother Alcena for sharing the story of St. Philip. And I think all of us, you can unmute yourselves by holding your space bar down and just give her a thank you.
Woo. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you. It was a great story.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank all of you for all that you're doing and you get us all engaged in this work in this town.
And so now Mira and Yasmin will give us a little bit more insight into what our season of sacred encounter is going to look like in our one-to-one conversations. And then Pastor Maria will talk to us about our team time. So, Mira?
Thanks, LaVeta. Hey, everyone. My name is Mira Ayala, and I'm a part of the Multnomah County Cohort design team for the Leaven Land and Housing Coalition, and I'm a member of the Leaven community and Salt and Light Lutheran Church, and I'm an organizer in the Cully neighborhood with Yasmin. Yasmin, ¿quieres presentarte?
Sí. Hola a todos, mi nombre es Yasmin Vélez y soy parte del equipo de diseño para el corte de condado de Multnomah y soy organizadora de Cully.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yasmin Vélez, and I'm part of the Multnomah County design team for the coalition, and I'm an organizer in the Cully neighborhood.
Mientras siguen reflexionando cómo las historias y la historia del Santo Philip de Diácono tiene interés como tu historia o invita curiosidad acerca de la historia de tu comunidad, queremos compartir un poquito del enfoque para los equipos.
So as you continue to reflect on how Mother Alcena's story and the story of St. Philip the Deacon intersects with your own, or invites curiosity about your own community's story, or the land that your community gathers on, we want to share a bit about the focus for the core team work in the coming months.
Estamos entrando en temporada del encuentro sagrado, mientras construimos capacidad para este trabajo y desarrollo de los líderes e invitar a nuevos líderes para discernir los próximos pasos en el área de las viviendas accesibles para nuestra comunidad y para las tierras sagradas.
So we are entering into a season of sacred encounters as we seek to build capacity for this work, to develop ourselves as leaders and invite new leaders in to discover leadership in our community, to discern the next steps around affordable housing for our communities and for the land that we steward, and for those systems that we want to change. So what does that mean? So this fall and winter, in these coming months, you'll be spending time with your core team, mapping out the relationships in your circle. Some of you have already been doing this work, and having one-to-ones with folks, listening deeply for the pressures and also the energy and the gifts and the possibility, imagination present in your community. You'll be spending time on your congregational land genealogy, asking, what is it that you already know about your land story? What are you curious about? And maybe the story that we heard tonight provoked some more curiosity. Where and from whom could you learn more about the land that you gather on? Who in your team will do this research? How will you do it? So as LaVeta said, there are lots of resources to help you in both of these two areas, both in the mapping of relationships and in doing the one-to-ones, and in doing this congregational land genealogy. So just want to encourage you to have a look at those resources as you're continuing to gather together with your team and do this work together. Then in the start of the new year, we all, when I say we, Yasmin and I are also doing this work here in the Cully neighborhood. We'll be gathering folks together for virtual house meetings, so smaller gatherings of folks where we'll share what we're hearing in our one-to-ones. And then after that, for a larger community discernment gathering to begin to weave together all that we've been hearing and lay out some of those next steps for action. And all along the way, you will have the accompaniment of a member of the cohort design team. So please be in communication and receive that accompaniment as you also are accompanying us. And now I want to pass it over to Maria, who's going to talk about some of our next steps.
Hi, thank you. Let me just give myself a spotlight so y'all can, here we go. So we're gonna wrap up as a larger group at 8 o'clock. We're gonna spend a little bit of time after I give you this kind of next steps. We're gonna spend a little bit of time evaluating because we really wanna hear what it is that you have, what were the strengths, things that we can improve and evolve on this. And then at 8 o'clock, we're going to break out into team times so that that's one of the things that we received as feedback, that it would actually be helpful for us to spend some time together in our teams. So if you are able to stay, please do. That's why we've asked you to check your names and put your community in front of your name. If you haven't done that, this is a good time to do that so that LaVeta can split us all up into our breakout rooms and you can end up in the right group. And we'll spend some time talking. Melissa is going to give us some details about some ways that we can focus that time. And then one of the things that's really important is to make sure that we have set times to meet as teams. I say that as a we because I'm on the St. Philip's team, that we have set time to meet between now and our next meeting as a coalition. And so take some time to meet, make sure you set up that time before you leave tonight, if you can do that. We will be meeting a little bit early. Typically we're the 4th Wednesday of the month, but that would be Thanksgiving next month. We will be meeting a week early, so that means you might need to get your meeting done a little bit earlier than you might typically have to do that. And then we will also send out an agenda over probably this weekend for you to actually use during your team time. So if you find that agenda helpful for helping you focus your conversations and think about what it means to do one-on-ones and sacred encounter with your communities, then you can take a look at that agenda and we'll get it out to you this weekend. Mostly the focus of that time is actually going to be on exploring land genealogies. So we will send you out some links that we've mentioned here and make sure that you have some resources to be able to dig into that as a team. I think that those are the next steps. If I've missed anything, anyone on the design team can jump in, but otherwise I will hand it over to Judy, who will lead us in a little bit of evaluation before we break out into our teams.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so very much for joining us. And I think I'm just totally blown away from the visitor that we had this evening, Reverend Alcena Boozer. I have known her for most of my life, and I admire her and consider her to be one of my mentors in my professional life. And so I just want to give a shout out once again to her and to LaVeta for making arrangements to have her here. Her story was powerful, and I think it excites me personally to know that we're going to be able to move forward telling our own land genealogy stories, which I'm sure are very powerful as well. So thank you again, Mother Boozer. and I appreciate the time that you took with us this evening so very much. It touched my heart. I'm Judy Petrie, and I am on the design team with the Multnomah County Cohort Coalition. And I'm going to ask you some questions about this evening's meeting. So one of the things we'd like to know is what went well, and you can put these comments in the chat box if you'd like. What went well? What was powerful to you? And what changes or suggestions would you make for us or recommend to us in future meetings? We have enjoyed having you here this evening, and I think the biggest outcome that I see for our evening is that we have the power. We have the power that God has given us, and we can do anything. We're fierce. We're determined, and we're going to do what is the right thing to do because it's the justice that needs to be done. People need roofs over their heads. People should not be living in the street. And we, as powerful people, faith communities, are going to make it happen. Thank you. Together. We're going to do it together, not by myself.
But you'll lead us, Judy. Thank you so much.
Yes.
We'll go together. So I just want to, please keep putting your evaluations in the chat box. We take them very seriously. They help shape the next agendas. And so don't be polite. It makes us better. We are learning together. So again, we're going to move into team time at this point. LaVeta is going to send you in your breakout rooms in a moment. And these are the questions for team time tonight. Do some debrief of tonight. Do some reflection. I think about sacred encounters that are not reflected on as kind of undigested food. We need to digest one another's offerings in order to gain energy together and build our communal muscle capacity. So what is moving within me from the land story that I heard from Mother Alcena and St. Philip the Deacon? What is moving? I went from this to this as I listened to the story. Pay attention, because that's capacity that's building within you and around you. So pay attention to that. And also begin to talk a little bit about what is our congregation's land story? What do we know? And where can we learn more? What questions do we have? You might just start like based on what you heard from Mother Alcena's story and St. Philip the Deacon's story, you might just start to okay, I heard that in their story. I don't know anything about that. What happened there for us? So just get very curious. I think another way to do this too is you can read as you learn more, you can start looking and mapping where's the power over in our congregation's land story and the story of the land and the peoples that lived on this land. Where's the power over operating? Where's the power within operating, and where's the power among operating in the story? So again, I heard in Mother Alcena's story, power over in the vestry at St. Stephen, saying you can't be on the vestry because you're Black. And so they went and formed a new congregation. They discovered power within and among to do that, and power among from the vestry. And they went to power over in the vestry to get the money to do that. So there's so many examples, and it's really important. Questions I was left with was, I wanted Mother Alcena to I was curious if she knows, and I bet she does, but it's research that our communities can do. What were the policies that have created gentrification in our neighborhoods? Let's pay attention to that power over dynamic. And so those are just some examples. What is your congregation's land story? What do you know? Where can you learn more? And make sure you have that next core team meeting set so that you can come back together. We'll send you an agenda for that meeting, and you can continue to dig in to your community's land genealogy. Okay. I think that's it. I think we are ready to go into our breakout rooms. It is 8 p.m. You are blessed to go.